Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to today's session. Welcome to the Collaborative Science for Estuaries series. This is Nick Sobral with the Science Collaborative. Today's session features a transfer project that elevated and articulated the reserve system's niche in addressing marine debris through a series of workshops and the development of a roadmap, which the team will say more about shortly. As always, before we get started, I just got a quick introduction to the reserve system, to the Science Collaborative program, and to this webinar series that you are joining today. So, the National Estuarine Research Reserve System is a network of 30 unique reserves as shown on this map. It's a NOAA program that works in collaboration with a local place-based partner, either at each site, either a state agency, university, or a nonprofit. Each reserve site includes programs focused on the activities you can see on the slide here, which are land stewardship, research and scientific monitoring, training and engagement programs for the public and local officials, and education. The Science Collaborative supports science for estuarine and coastal decision makers by supporting user-driven collaborative research and knowledge exchange activities that address critical coastal management needs identified by the reserves. The Collaborative Science for Estuaries webinar series features project teams supported by the Science Collaborative, program staff, and partners. Speakers share their unique approaches to addressing current coastal and estuary management issues. Be on the lookout for future webinars to learn more about new methods to integrate experts and users into the research process and how their research results and products might inform your own work. A quick note on informed consent. Webinars are a valuable learning opportunity for us as a program. Insights that speakers share and participants share, and sessions like you can help inform how we support others in doing collaborative science, for example, in the development of future workshops or webinars or resources. These are all things that end up in our guide to collaborative science, which is open access. So with that in mind, we just want to inform everybody that insights or feedback that you share, either in chat or via the exit survey that launches at the end, may be used for program learning and development purposes. Please note that if we capture a direct quote from you that we'd like to use for learning purposes, we will reach out to you ahead of time to seek permission and provide an explanation of its use. All such quotes would be used anonymously, and we're grateful for the opportunity to learn alongside you. Okay, a note on housekeeping. All attendees are muted upon entry. We'll be handling questions via the Q&A feature in Zoom there. You can enter questions for presenters as they occur to you throughout the webinar. You can also put them in chat. We'll be monitoring both when we get to that point. I will plan to discuss as many as we can at the end of the presentation today. You'll also be able to verbalize your questions if you want to during the Q&A session by raising your hand, and one of the organizers will confirm with you before we unmute you that you're ready to come off mute and ask your question. So just keep on the lookout for that if you would like to verbalize your question. And as I mentioned at the beginning, chat is visible to all. You can use it to talk amongst yourselves. You can also use it to ask organizers support or technical questions if you have them. Just keep an eye on who you're messaging. I always mess that up, so just keep an eye on it. Okay, so with that, I'll introduce our speakers for today. So joining us today are Kristen Goodrich, the Director of Training and Engagement at the Tijuana River Reserve and an interdisciplinary social scientist and the PI for this project, Empress Holliday, an environmental geographer and part of the Training and Engagement Program at the Tijuana River Reserve. Fred Reppun is the Education Coordinator at the Heʻeia National Estuarine Research Reserve in Hawaii, and Shimi is the Research Coordinator at the Heʻeia Reserve in Hawaii. And I believe Empress is taking over for screen share, so I will go ahead and stop there and let her take over.
We're really excited to introduce to you all, if you haven't seen or heard of this already, is a new roadmap that's been developed for the system on addressing marine debris. This is the roadmap cover, shot by our very own Kristen Goodrich, photographer in-house. And this was taken of a group of youth that were participating in Coastal Cleanup Day last year at the reserve. So again, we're really excited to dig into it a little bit more with you today. We're going to go over the core teams of who was involved in the project and the reserves involved as well, and go over a little bit about how the roadmap came to be. Actually, it spans some work back a few years, and then we're going to go over what's in the roadmap and ask some questions about potentially how folks might be using it. And then we have a couple of next steps for the roadmap for us as a team, but also for yourselves if you're interested in using the roadmap, which we hope you are. The reserve that were involved in the project was, again, myself and Kristen here at the Tijuana River NERRS, and we had Heʻeia NERRS as well as Padilla Bay. And then we also included what we call a larger debris community of practice, or our DCOP, if you'll see those terminology used inside of the roadmap, along with our project advisory council. And we're really thankful for their support and co-development of the roadmap along the way as well. So again, myself and Kristen, but along with our California Sea Grant fellow, Megan Spitzer. She's no longer a fellow with us at the reserve here, but she was very instrumental in helping us develop the program and keeping us in line and on task as well. But along with Dr. Shimi Ree and Casey Ching and Fred at the Heʻeia NERR, and Dr. Sylvia Yang at the Padilla Bay NERR. So these photos were taken actually of a core team retreat that we had at Padilla, or sorry, at Heʻeia, and it was incredible. Casey, Shimi, and Fred were amazing hosts, so we're very thankful for that. But we'll go ahead and kick off into how this roadmap came to be, and Shimi will be sharing more with you on that.
Thanks, Empress. Hi, everyone. So for those of us who have been with us as part of the Marine Plastics or Plastics Working Group for the NERRS since 2019, this will be a review for you. But when I say 2019, yes, we've been at this for about 6 years now, and it's been a long journey to get to this roadmap. Get it? So in 2019, this plastics work group was founded at the annual meeting. It was actually a regional meeting for the Pacific. And, there was a need expressed to look at plastics or microplastics or marine debris and the importance of addressing that at each of our reserves. So actually, Sylvia and I started the working group. And then shortly after that, in 2020, we ended up sending a survey to all of the reserves and to look at what kind of priorities people had about addressing marine debris in each of their reserves. And then also to look at, what sort of efforts were already going on and what resources were available to address marine debris. And so these results were shared at the 2020 annual meeting. And I want to share a really little bit about what came out of it. So these circles are meant to be nurdles, but when we asked the question, what would you like a NERRS plastics work group to achieve? And the nurdles, the number of nurdles expresses, the kind of how many. And this was a variety of short, medium, and long-term goals. So as you can see, there was anywhere from starting a national conversation about building capacity, which is a big thing, to about creating a shared repository of resources and standardized actions, such as a standardized monitoring protocol and toolkit. But then the most amount of nurdles and votes went to producing a collaborative national product or program that involves all sectors. So then when we asked, what can we do right now? Because a lot of people were like, this is really important to us, but we can't really do anything. But a lot of people were in favor of producing a collaborative national product or program that involves all sectors to really capitalize on finding the NERRS niche, as you say. This is what our program was called earlier, like what makes us different from NOAA or NOAA who does marine debris program or things like that, to really leverage our different sectors. Okay, so coming back to the timeline. So now we're looking at 2020 to 2022, and we realize, so if we hit, I think, next, yes. So enhancing the debris community of practice. And this came about because we really didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There were several others, at NOAA and Sea Grant that was already addressing plastics, as a major priority. And then NOAA was the leader in cleaning up marine debris and having coastal and beach methods and standardized methods. But what we were hearing over and over was that they didn't have methods for looking at estuaries or streams. And then we had several others and researchers that were looking at identifying microplastics and the effect on marine animals. But we really wanted to bring people together as a debris community of practice and learn from each other and identify the areas where the NERRS system itself could uniquely contribute. So then after many iterations and working group meetings, we decided to go for this National NERRS Science Collaborative Science Transfer Grant to really make a plan for a plan of this roadmap and think about what is the next steps for the NERRS and how we can actually create a collaboratively develop this roadmap. And so as part of this as part of this grant, we conducted knowledge transfer workshops. So as you can see from 2023, we acquired the grant in 2022, and we conducted knowledge transfer workshops 1 and 2. Some was virtual, and then an annual meeting. And then as you can see, Empress talked about the writing retreat and workshop at Heʻeia NERRS when we decided to sit down, take in all the information that we got at the knowledge transfer workshops and start drafting the roadmap. Some of you guys who were there at the annual meeting and the knowledge transfer workshop in number 3, that was a virtual one, to think about how to communicate marine debris. And then we had the 4th knowledge transfer workshop at the annual meeting in New Jersey. And that's when we try to socialize the roadmap within the system. Oh no, 2024. So that was last year in Wells. And then so currently in 2025, this is the portion where we're trying to socialize the roadmap, tell you guys where we're at, what it's about. We're going to describe, Kristen's going to describe the components of it. Fred's going to describe a little bit of next steps, and then hope that you guys can all be on this journey with us, be on this road trip with us to continue this effort with us. I'm going to transfer it over to Kristen in the next slide, but just to highlight that the knowledge transfer workshops were really designed so that we get everyone's opinions and input from different sectors. And that included, not just our NERRS, research, stewardship, CTP, or training and engagement and manager sections, but also including, the foundations and the NERRA board and et cetera. So it was really, really great to see everybody come together. And so each of these workshops were basically focused on developing different parts of the roadmap, as you can see on the slide, about cross-sector, communicating about marine debris, and socializing. So if you guys are part of this, please share in the chat. Were any of you involved in the process of developing this roadmap? Did you guys come to the workshops at, whether it was virtual or at any of the annual meetings? And if you did come, and if you do remember any, then something that you remember about the workshop.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Shimi, so much. It's so amazing to see how much progress has been made since 2019, and knowing that the seeds for this work were planted probably even before that. The last 5 years have been pretty amazing to get to be a part of and also witness. And so much heart has gone into what you see before you, the roadmap. I'm also looking at the chat too to see if anyone who's with us today were involved in the process. We are excited to have you back, and very much hope too that you see yourselves in this roadmap. It's very much a product of just the contributions of the system and beyond our debris community of practice. So as Shimi shared, this is really the meat of the roadmap. It's the framework, and these 3 integrative, or in other words, cross-sector approaches emerged as a direct result of the engagement over the transfer workshops and activities that were conducted over the course of this project. So I'll spend just a couple minutes with you today walking you through those cross-sector approaches, and then perhaps giving you just a nugget or an example of what is within each of those approaches as we think about the implementation and integration. So number 1, our first approach is to create a national narrative that tells the story of marine debris across the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. Our second integrative approach is to build relationships and partnerships for effective collaboration and with the greater marine debris community of practice. And our third approach is to establish and maintain shared resources and opportunities. And that's for reserves to voluntarily participate and collaborate with other reserves and the greater marine debris community of practice. So a resource, for example, include like the Debris Community of Practice Project database, which was compiled from the 2020 NERRS survey that Shimi referred to. And so we thought we'd just pause here for a moment and also engage you in this way. If you are working on marine debris and you haven't been a part of any of the workshops, transfer workshops, or other points of engagement through the project, we would love to hear from you and have you be part of updating that database. So I think throughout the webinar today, there'll be various opportunities to do that. Empress, can we get into these approaches? We'll try to dig in. We could spend probably a webinar on each of these approaches themselves, but we'll give you an overview, high-level summary. For each of these integrative approaches, you will find that they have the same components, and that was by design. So each of those components will outline challenges that were identified during those workshops to the actual implementation, application pathways. So each of those pathways gives some concrete really guidance in terms of how to think about implementing them. And also throughout, you'll see case studies, really powerful stories that depict just how this work is being done, both acknowledging the challenges, but also the opportunities. And I think importantly, something that I feel I'd like to share is that the integrative approaches are meant to be opportunities recommended to the NERRS that focus on different reserves and sectors toward common goals. And while there is such a deliberate NERRS focus here, the document was really developed, the roadmap was really developed in the spirit of it being able to be used beyond the reserve system and within a growing debris community of practice. So we'll just tap into each one of these approaches. It's hard for me to even be able to pick just one example from each of the approaches because there's so much good material in each of these. But we'll quickly go through them. So the first approach, which is about creating a national narrative, that was very much one approach that was worked on in collaboration with communication superstars, including those in NOAA's marine debris program. But we definitely wanted to unpack different ways that we could approach developing, creating a national narrative through these three pathways. The first being creating an infographic or another visual showcasing the diverse efforts across reserves. A second pathway to utilize social media, and a third pathway to utilize NERA as a mechanism for communicating a national narrative. And I can just give you two examples, maybe from pathways 2 and 3. The social media bit, I think what we learned through engaging over these transfer workshops was there's probably some really impactful ways that we as a system can be leveraging social media. It could even look like simply creating a hashtag that is about estuaries and debris that we can connect to our various communication activities. And maybe more specifically, utilizing NERA as a mechanism for communicating a national narrative. For those of you who are not familiar with NERA, the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association, our national nonprofit partner, we were able to work with them to develop messaging guidance around debris and use that as really a pathway for us to be better communicating about this work that is happening at really each of our reserves as we came to learn. So the second approach, relationships and partnerships, again, building relationships and partnerships for effective collaboration of intended partners and users at local to global scales. You can see here 4 pathways were developed for this integrative approach, but I could focus maybe on creating a resource repository as maybe the first pathway, and an example of which I think again we'll be sharing with you throughout the course of this webinar as a way to really collect the data and be able to better tell the stories of what's happening across our national system and beyond. And then our third integrative approach is one that's very close to my heart, is sharing resources and opportunities. So this integrative approach is to think about establishing, building, and maintaining this repository of shared resources and opportunities for reserves to voluntarily participate and collaborate with other reserves and the greater marine debris community of practice. So if you can't tell, this is definitely an interest among those who participated across the project. Sharing this information feels fundamental for us to be able to build more of a movement in this area. One of the pathways I think is really in influencing broader action through boundary spanning. And this, I think, has showed up in a number of ways, particularly in us as a reserve system trying to be really deliberate in thinking about how we get the research that we do, both at the reserves and within our research communities, getting that into spaces that and with organizations and entities that are thinking about advocacy and activism, so that we can be really moving as a system in a science-based way that informs the kinds of activities that our marine debris community practice may be taking on. So, thanks, Empress, for the challenge of summarizing these the meat of the roadmap. Again, we could probably spend a webinar on each of these alone, but hope that just some of the very small examples that came out of this exercise of developing integrative approaches, pathways, and then even suggestions throughout the roadmap on how to begin or start your journey on the pathway, you'll find in much greater depth in reading the roadmap. So I think Empress, we have another point of engagement, maybe a poll.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're curious, right? If you've just heard this for the first time, out of the bat, does any of this seem useful to you? So we're just curious, which approach maybe resonated with you the most. We found that when we we found that when we kind of dug into this with the marine debris work group after we reconvened them for several years, folks were really attracted to certain approaches, but then like the pathways, they're like, I'm a very visual person and I really want to, work on creating these graphics and things. And so some people were very interested in creating databases. So just any of these integrative approaches, does one shout out at you? Is where I'm curious. And I'll give you guys a minute or two to work on the poll. But then also, I just wanted to note that underneath each pathway that you're seeing these quotes here, those are quotes that were taken from all the workshops and engagement opportunities that we've done on the roadmap so far, where folks have come up with very specific ideas and opportunities of how to apply each pathway. So these things aren't necessarily in the roadmap. These have come from folks that have participated in developing the roadmap too, and just how we've shared it. So just wanted to note that there. Okay.
We're a little over half participation here, but it's been open for about a minute and a half, so I can close the poll whenever you'd like me to.
Yeah, sure. Let's see.
All
I know
right.
folks are listening more
Oh,
podcasts.
that I think that got a few people more to respond. So double check it.
It got me engaged, Nick. I just realized that panelists can't vote. I was like, oh dang.
I'm very much like the relationship and partnership building approach really shouts to me, and that pathway of creating like a living database of partners is so cool. Yeah, see, look at that. Shared resources and opportunities. That's so cool.
You're not alone, Empress.
And national narrative, that I think we found that was probably one of our more challenging chapters to write, I think, was national narrative, because it's like system wide, right? And we have a portion in there about like external messaging as a system versus internal messaging. So that one was really tricky. I can tell folks aren't too too jazzed about that. But now we're going to shift over and Fred's going to take over and talk a little bit about findings and outputs here.
Okay, thanks, Empress. So I'm just here to kind of wrap up and cheerlead a little bit and hope that you all, dig into the roadmap a little more and use it to support your work. But the main outputs from the Science Collaborative project were, or some of the outputs rather, were this one pager that you see here, which is a quick overview of the roadmap and has the link to the full roadmap. So definitely use that, distribute it among your partners, use it to start conversations, that kind of thing. another output towards the end of the project was the reconvening of the marine debris working group, which hadn't met in several years. And we shared the roadmap with that group, and they dug in and kind of discussed the areas of the roadmap that were of most of interest to them. And so again, this is a work group that was not just within the NERRS system, but included folks, many of, I think some of you on this call, who are adjacent to the reserve system and collaborators in different ways. And two of the main areas discussed at that meeting were the what kind of database would be most useful to folks within the reserve system and with the greater debris community of practice. Thinking about it serving a role of showing who has experience and expertise with different aspects of marine debris. And even if it only, covered half of the folks in the NERRS system who are working on marine debris, it would serve as a really important first point of contact where somebody either from within or outside the reserve system could really kind of find who could help them out with a particular project. The other thing discussed in that convening was how to approach interdisciplinary research on marine debris, from everything, including the effects of microplastics to more kind of practical management related questions like how do you access marine debris for removal in marsh ecosystems where there's not a nice edge, like a beach to walk along. So starting with sort of listing the questions that are most of interest to reserves, and then maybe building towards science collaborative proposals, and then ultimately leading to more standardized monitoring protocols. So that was a fruitful reconvening of that working group. And we developed a database of sorts. It's pretty much just a spreadsheet right now of who's doing what in the NERRS system around marine debris. And we're actually hoping, I think, to have you folks jump in there today and help us to update that database, right, guys? So be ready to click on that and think about some of the things that you're doing. Some of you already put stuff in it back in 2020, or we distributed a survey in 2020, and based on your responses, filled out the database, but we were going to update it to see how things have evolved since then. Okay, so the roadmap is just that. It's a map, and it's up to all of us to pick a route and follow it to get to the destination of better addressing marine debris as a system. So use it internally. Use it to write your next round of Davidson Fellow management needs, or other kinds of priority setting documents that we have, your management plan, that sort of thing. If you're in the reserve system, use it to stage a convening with local partners and discuss some of the different approaches in there and what might be a good fit for a partnership. And then use it externally and internally for communications. We have National Estuaries Week coming up. That's an opportunity to start building that national narrative. And there's some strategies outlined in the roadmap that might be of use to you there. So, I feel a little bit hypocritical because I have not yet worked on marine debris. It was an idea that we need to do more. And for me in my education programs, that's definitely true. And so this roadmap kind of helps me and hopefully all of you to be a little more intentional and strategic about how you do that, and build collaboration and alliances across the NERRS system and with the greater debris community of practice. So the next slide has all of the links that you will need to be able to access all of this stuff. There you go. The roadmap is the first one. The database that we were just talking about is the next one. And then the last link is to join the work group formerly known as plastics, now known as marine debris, and get onto the listserv for future announcements.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, we were going to drop the database link earlier and have you folks fill it out. But if you wouldn't mind clicking on it now and just taking a quick look, you can find if you filled out the survey back in 2020, your reserve or your organization might be on there in the far left column, so you can look for it and then to the right, give an update if you're doing something new since then. If you're not on the spreadsheet already, just scroll down to the bottom and add your organization in the left column, and then in the right two columns, give us an update about what you're working on with regard to marine debris. And this is the database right now. So this is something that hopefully will help all of us connect with each other.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm hopeful that we see some cool updated projects happening 5 years after that survey. But I also just want to go back very quickly. So the photos that you're looking at here, we, as part of a search for a cover photo, which, by the way, I could not believe how difficult it would be to find a cover photo for our roadmap. But we wanted something compelling. We wanted something illustrative of what happens on the ground at reserves. And so in our search, we put out a call for photos, and then started targeting some individual reserves that, using that database that we currently had, stated they were working on debris. And so we got some wonderful photos back from North Inlet Winya Bay that I just wanted to highlight here. The wonderful work of the volunteers. The first one on the left there looks like an album cover. So does the one on the right. This is so I just wanted to very quickly give a shout out to them and thank them for sending in some wonderful photos here. And as we jump into a Q&A, we just had some questions for you. You can type them in the chat, or if this helps you, ask us any questions at all. If again, if there anything that excites you or interests you about the roadmap or any of its components, or if you have any questions about using it, do you see yourself or your reserve using it? And what might that look like? So feel free if you want to type in the chat, or I think Nick might have some if you've been, I couldn't see the chat while on here, but yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into it, I guess. Nick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Empress. Let me put us in gallery view here so we can all see. We do have a question to everybody else who has not posted questions yet. You can, again, put them in either the Q&A or the chat. We'll be watching both. Don't be shy. So first question we have here, what connections, if any, does the roadmap have to the NOAA Marine Debris Program actions, e.g. regional marine debris action plans? I think you probably addressed this one, but maybe it's good to recap it.
Yeah, this is an awesome question. Thanks, Caleb. And we put a lot of thought into making sure that we had crosswalks at all stages of the project with NOAA's Marine Debris Program. Shimi, I might pass it to you because I know that you spent a good amount of time too, especially in the early stages, trying to learn about NOAA's Marine Debris Program strategic planning process, and that informed very much our framework for how we approached our roadmap development. So I might pass it to you for some more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. It was, really apparent to us that the Marine Debris Program, which is active in many of our reserve sites and states, in Hawaii, there's a big program. So we connected with Andrew Mason, and then Mark Manuel here, and then many folks who really talked to us and, about the methodology, the thinking behind the development of their marine debris action plan. So when we first wrote the proposal, we really modeled our approaches and the collaborative, like the knowledge transfer workshops on how to create the different components, because they actually shared with us the process by which they use to create their marine debris action plans. And then, what ended up happening is we adapted to match our reserve and the needs that we were hearing from our reserve partners. But really, it was informed. And then I think, Andrew Mason and his other folks they came to one of our workshops in Seattle, and we really connected with them throughout the way. So we're really excited to see what the next steps would be and how we can still continue to communicate with our debris community of practice to integrate their efforts as well as, our ongoing efforts. I don't know if that answers your question, Caleb.
Sorry, I was muted again. Okay, another question came in. First, there was a comment to go with it that said, awesome to catch up on all the great work. Agreed. Question was, if there were a NERRS national product announcement, what would the group prioritize as the next step, project, or product?
I can start, but I think we might all have different responses. And Chris, thanks so much for the question and all of your support along the way as we brought this project to life. And it was so helpful to work with all of the sector leads across the reserve system to help us think about how training and engagement, research, stewardship, and education all could see themselves in this document and roadmap. But I guess personally, I think we all probably, each of us gravitate to a different approach. I think, and quite honestly, when we were exploring how to approach developing a roadmap, we thought, well, maybe we think about it as a national product, but ended up making a really deliberate decision to first start with this transfer work to really understand and transfer knowledge between the core team and the reserves that were involved in the development of the roadmap from the team role. And then really get a sense of like, what is it that the system is doing and craving? And so we thought, let's start with the transfer and learn and exchange knowledge about this. And then perhaps this could inform something more system-wide, like a national product or even potentially a future science collaborative research endeavor. And so I think it's helpful for you to ask this question because it allows us to give a little more context on how we approached it before the national product stage. But for me, I guess I'm always really compelled by thinking about, and although maybe the Q&A was less ranked, I think developing a national narrative is a really important part of this. That certainly could, I think, be part of a national product that the system works on together, but also the strong need that was conveyed and that we really picked up on through this process about building a repository that could inform efforts around research and data collection, but also some of the outreach, education, training and engagement efforts that work on both informing policy around marine debris action and also some of the very important behavior change kind of components that are essential, I think, to working at various levels of this very systemic problem. But others, Empress, Fred, Shimi, you might have other kind of NERRS national product announcement, next step projects that this roadmap could actually take us to.
Yeah, this is not, answering an RFP, obviously. But, so I mean, when we were conducting the survey and just throughout the years, we've heard over and over again from NOAA as well as from the reserve folks that they wanted a standardized monitoring protocol. And that was really hard because all of our reserves just look so different, right? And there are some similarities in marsh areas or streams, et cetera, but really the NOAA Marine Debris Program stressed to us that their methods were based on like shoreline monitoring or marine derelict gear and marine monitoring. So how do we adapt it to like the landscapes within our reserves, the varied landscapes within our reserves? So I can see a natural thing that if if someone would, you know, people would, a team of people would lead it up, is like a menu of protocols that people could choose from. And, you know, that's really like what Jace and them have done with the Nerdle Patrol, so people can kind of get in there, and then how do you share it, right? Like the beautiful thing about the Nerdle Patrol is like you can put it in the database and people can look it up and then connect with folks across the reserves and across the landscape. So I think something like that with a standardized monitoring or a menu of standardized monitoring, and then connecting with training and education to connect the outputs, like checks off a lot of the integrative approaches. But then the other thing is, I think, like ultimately, what is the messaging like to change behaviors? Like that was another thing that really came out of the knowledge transfer workshops, especially in Jacques Cousteau, was like how do we work with foundations like Surfrider, or you know, places like NERRA already does quite a lot about, you know, promoting and talking about plastics, you know, and so how do we promote it so that we actually have behavior change or policy change? So something like that, I think, you know, those two.
I'll just add that the decision we kind of came to when we were writing the roadmap, you know, not to really recommend a single you know, a priority or strategic concept or national product, was sort of because we looked at the existing ones and just found that marine debris shows up, it could show up in all of them, the existing ones. Like for example, um, under habitat restoration, you know, we could craft some language there around large scale marine debris removal. Whereas under water quality, you know, that's where we might want to talk about microplastics. So we think rather than like a single national product, this issue needs to be integrated across all of them, and other planning documents that exist within the reserve system as well.
Yeah, and I guess just to tack onto it, not to mention it for a fourth and fifth time, but that DCOT database. And I say this just because as we were developing the roadmap, which the actual like process of writing, editing, working so very closely with the Science Collaborative and their graphics team. So Alex and Fatima are absolute superheroes. All the graphics you see in that roadmap were them. I don't know how many emails there are back and forth, like, can we tweak this, move this a little to the left and downgrade the font size? But in going through the process of developing the roadmap, it was actually quite challenging to find out who was doing what and what do we put in the roadmap, especially when it came to case studies. Like there are the larger and more well-known ones, things like Nerdle Patrol and you know, like the other databases and things that we use or know of. But to highlight, there are so many reserves to highlight. And so just going off of that 2020 database, there were folks that were just like, I don't even work there anymore and I don't know. Or people were like, I don't know what's happening with that program. You know, it kind of died out. So I would say updating that database and turning that into something is a recommended pathway that we have in there. And whether that's, you know, a website or it stays as a spreadsheet and gets spread around, I'm not sure, or, you know, whomever steps into the marine debris work group and, you know, takes it on themselves to organize the work group and to maintain that list as well. I think it's actually really critical. And I'm seeing some of you in there, which is awesome. And thank you so much for updating that. And it's good to see some continued as well, that folks are still doing these projects. But also take photos of what you're doing. Take photos and document it and share it as best you can. Those are also several illustrated in several pathways in the roadmap itself about how to share that work and communicate about it, because they're very compelling stories. And I think it's important that we all understand as a system what's happening and who's doing what in order to be able to talk about it. So that'd be a recommendation for me.
That's awesome, Empress. And I too am seeing lots of anonymous animals in the Google Doc or in our spreadsheet here, our database. So it's very exciting to see and see new fresh projects or continuations of of projects that had been occurring back in 2020. I'll just invite those of you on the webinar who may not be within the reserve system, but are part of our larger debris community of practice. Like, this is also an opportunity for you to share with us what you might be working on, either in partnership with a reserve or in the larger community of practice. So you can see here, we have the Marine Debris Foundation and NOAA's Marine Debris Program, of course, and California Sea Grant. Those are all part of that database and tracking. So it's awesome to see. And thanks for continuing to populate. And Chris, thanks for your question. Lots of directions to go with this, and we talked about it a bit as a choose your own adventure.
I do have another question here if you want to. People can feel free to keep filling out the database, obviously, but as another question just to think about. So someone is curious about the process of creating a national narrative. Can you talk more about the process you use to learn about current narratives?
Well, I went on Instagram and started looking for hashtags that had lots of followings related to plastics and marine debris. That was one thing, and it was kind of illuminating. And we listed some of the top ones in the roadmap. Um, the other one was, so we tried to think about it in terms of building a narrative internally, and that relates to all of those different planning documents and strategic concepts and national products and all those different lists that the reserve system has, right? Like management needs for Science Collab, that sort of stuff. And so thinking about what are all of those, and how can we, um, which ones are, um, able to integrate marine debris and plastics priorities into them. And then thinking externally, we just tried to look at what are the opportunities that reserves have um, to get the word out more broadly about what they're doing locally. And um, so through social media, through collaboration with NERRA, um, and then NERRA actually kind of helped to put together some guidance about messaging. So I think that's included in the appendix. And so, yeah, it's a starting point really. And hopefully, um, there's NERRA has put out a lot of different stories about the efforts that reserves are doing. And that list is in there as well. So if you're looking for a template or just some ideas about how you can showcase your work, go check that out. So anyway, I don't know if that answers the question, but we tried to break it down, thinking about internal versus external communications, and just looking for what are the existing opportunities there.
Sorry, can I just add? So I think maybe the questioner also asked about the process. And so one of the things we did too is like, I really remember really well the SWOT analysis that we did at the knowledge transfer workshop in Jacques Cousteau. And, that's like, what is it? Strength, weakness, opportunity, and challenge. Did I get it? Success? No, it's strength, I think. And so, like there were so much challenges, right? Like, that we encountered. And if you look on the roadmap, you will see in the section that like the beginning part of the national narrative talks about what Fred was saying about internal and external narratives. But then there were like the challenges that really, got us thinking about what are the challenges towards establishing the national narrative, whether it is internal or external. So I think some of the workshops that we did, that was the knowledge transfer, whether it was virtual or in person, really helped us to craft it so that it was not, just surface level, but really thinking about how do we actually accomplish this.
Yeah, and just big shout out to Roca Communications, who works closely with NERRA and their guidance and support in developing some of those products, as Fred said, is in the appendix. And then also Emily Green with Marine Debris Program, who helped to support us in our process around communications, and also provided some really important content along with her colleagues for one of our transfer workshops. So really helping us get to a place to think about what is it that we're trying to convey about the very unique role that estuaries play in the chain of debris becoming essentially marine debris, and why a strong focus on how programs that center around estuarine health and restoration can and are in many ways engaging with communities in place, how our programs can be unique in this larger debris community of practice. That really inspired the spark for this project about understanding what our niche is, and then also how we can communicate that. Just saw a comment from Stacy, but couldn't read quickly enough.
No education as an environmental actions common measure captures. It is defined as an activity that intentionally addresses an environmental problem, need, or hazard. All NOAA education programs are encouraged to report activities they're doing, like some of the marine debris work you've mentioned here.
Awesome. Thanks for the
Stacy.
response, Stacy.
Oh, one more question here. I just saw pop in, and maybe this will be the last one we have time for because we just got a few minutes left. So, I have not had the opportunity to read the roadmap. Is there any talk about how to prevent debris entering water systems in the first place?
Yes.
Good question.
Yeah, there's a couple of really good case studies in there. One based at our reserve, largely about the process of removing plastic bags in the city of Tijuana, being the first in Mexico to do it. And then I believe Hawaii also had an example about Shimi, is that right? There's the circular economy project. I think we had a case study in there on that as well. Yeah. So there's a couple of examples in there too. And I take your time going through it. It's a very large document, but it's got a lot of really good, juicy examples in there. I think personally we spent a lot of time choosing which case studies to best demonstrate these pathways and opportunities there. And they're really diverse. So highly recommend. And some of these things in terms of like resources to do, which is a question that I think like, okay, these are all nice, but maybe I don't have money to do these things, or maybe funding is, we're strapped for funding. Some of these things cost nothing, and by nothing, I mean like very, very low hanging fruit. And you don't need these massive, large project budgets to do some of the work that's in there. So we also tried to make sure that the pathways we offered and the case studies that we showcased in there ranged from, like maybe some of the bigger, more complex system-wide things, but maybe also something, an individual could do, or, a program at each reserve could do. So there's a lot in there. That's a great question though. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add to that, thanks, Empress. That's a really good question about prevention because, initially, if you have taken a look at the Marine Debris Action Plan that NOAA puts out, it's like removal, prevention, research, the efforts are very clear cut in terms of like, how do we approach the issue of marine debris? And we thought about, how do we integrate their action plan into like our integrative approaches. But I think like the prevention aspect for us, kind of comes as education or training. And then that also has to really clearly connect with developing that national narrative, right? And then also relationship building, because a lot of the foundations and ongoing efforts that are going on are aimed towards education, towards prevention. So I think, like Empress said, like many of these varied aspects of prevention and or removal or et cetera are embedded in our integrative approaches. And that's how we kind of came about in creating these approaches.
Okay, got about 2 minutes left. So I think for starters, thank you for all the comments and things I also see coming in. I'll put those all together so that speakers can see them on the way out too. But thank you everybody for joining us today. We have a bunch more webinars coming up. So for the foreseeable, I think next few months we have at least 2 a month. So the next one is September 23rd, and there's 2 in October. So keep an eye out for announcements. The webinar recording from this session should be available in the next couple days. Usually only takes us a day or two to put it together. If you register for the webinar, whether you attended or not, you'll get an automated email from us via Zoom that has the link to the summary page that'll have all the resources on it. So you can look out for that. It'll also be on the YouTube channel, so if you are subscribed to the YouTube channel, you'll get a notification automatically too. I think that's it for summary stuff. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. Thanks to the presenters for putting together such a great presentation. This was a fun one. I'm biased, I know, because, I was the program officer for this project, so I got to hear about this all along the way, and I was very excited for this webinar. So thank you to the
for
presenters
your
again.
support, Nick. It was very felt, and the product shows all of your input along the way too. So we're grateful to everyone for being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Everyone have a great rest of your day.